Hi everyone. In this example, we'll be looking at three of the hardest SAT math questions that we've pretty much ever seen. So essentially for this video, I looked at a Prep Scholar article which highlighted the 15 hardest SAT math questions that students have typically struggled with. To gather this information, Prep Scholar looked at student data as well as surveyed students. And so what I did is I picked three of the examples that they listed, and I'm going to solve them here just to show you kind of like how to go through them and how to kind of be able to face and complete hard SAT math questions. So like the thought process that you need to do them. So let's look at this first one. This says for a polynomial p of x, the value of p of 3 is negative 2. Which of the following must be true about p of x? So to answer this question, we need to know one specific theorem, which is called the binomial factor theorem. And it essentially states that if I have a polynomial and I divide it by a binomial, the constant in that binomial being plugged into the polynomial will tell us the value of the remainder. So that's a lot of information to take in, so I think the best way to explain it is to simply look at an example. So I have written here this polynomial x squared minus 4x plus 3. So let's say I were to divide this by the quantity x minus 4. To figure out what the remainder would be, I simply have to look at this second number, which is 4, and plug that back into the polynomial. So I have x minus 4, which means I'm going to plug 4 back in. So if I do 4 squared minus 4 times 4 plus 3, we have 16 minus 4 times 4, which is also 16, which is 0. And if we then add 3, we get 3. So what that tells us is that if we were to divide this polynomial right here by if we were to divide this by x minus 4, the remainder would be 3. So with that in mind, let's look at this question now. It says if we have the polynomial p of x and we know that its value of p of 3 is equal to negative 2, what must be true about it? Well, if we look at the first three answer choices, they only tell us factors. Now, a factor would be is if we plugged it back in and we got 0. And however, for this question, they don't give us any information about these first three, so we can kind of eliminate these. And if we look at choice D, it's exactly what we know. We know that if we divide by x minus 3, since they gave us p of 3, we're going to get a value of negative 2, since that is the polynomial value. So we know that the answer for this question has to be D. So for that one, you simply just need to know a formula and then be able to use its information. And we have a similar example here with number 2. So we have a grain silo is built from 2 right circular cones and a right circular cylinder with internal measurements represented by the figure above. Of the following, which is closest to the volume of the grain silo in cubic feet? So for this, I have two formulas listed below that we need to use to be able to solve this problem. We have a cone's volume formula, which is 1/3 pi r squared times the height, and we have a cylinder's volume formula, which is pi r squared times the height. So for this example, what we want to do is we want to notice that we have two cones which are identical, since we know that both their heights are 5 feet and their radiuses are both 5 feet. And we have a cylinder in the middle here whose radius is obviously still 5 feet and its height is 10 feet. So because we have the cone's volume and we know we have two identical ones, we can start plugging in the formula. So we have 1/3 pi, the radius is equal to 5, so 5 squared, times the height, which is 10. And I'm going to multiply this entire thing by 2, since we know we have two identical ones. And then I'm going to add this to the cylinders, which is pi times 5 times, pi times 5 squared times the height of 10. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a calculator for this, since we now have all of the numbers that we need. So I recommend that you also do this just to get practice with plugging these numbers in. Plus 250 times pi. And I get about 1045. That's rounded. And if we look at these answer choices, that is closest to choice D, which is the exact 1047.2. So for this question, all you want to do is be able to break down the diagram that they've given you and then use the formulas that you know. In this case, I was able to use the cone and cylinder formulas simply by breaking up the shape into the mini shapes that it is. Finally, let's look at this last example, which is if x is the average, the arithmetic mean of m and 9, y is the average of 2m and 15, and z is the average of 3m and 18, what is the average of x, y, and z in terms of m? So I wrote below a common formula that you've probably known, which is the average is equal to the sum divided by total. Essentially, if I want to figure out the average of a list, I need to add up all of the items and then divide by the total number of items that I have. So here it says x is the average of m and 9, the arithmetic mean, which means that x is equal to m plus 9 over 2, right? We want to sum them up and then divide by our total amount of items, which is basically just two total items, which are m and 9, which we've added up. We know that y is the average of 2m and 15, so y is equal to 2m plus 15 over 2. And we know that z is the average of 3m and 18, so z is equal to 3m plus 18 over 2. And so now it's asking us what is the average of all three of these in terms of m. So now we want to figure out the average of all three of these, which means that we need to add all of them up in terms of m. So now what we want to do is we want to add all of these up. So we have m plus 9 over 2 plus 2m plus 15 over 2. I'm just going to copy and paste these and shrink them a little bit, plus 3m plus 18. And now here's the important step. We've added all these up. Now how many items do we have? Well, we know in x we had 2 items. We know in y we had 2 items, and in z we had 2 items, which means that when we're dividing by the total amount of items, we need to actually divide by 6, since we now have 6 total items. And so if we add up the top, we have like numerators on the top, so we can just go straight up together and add them. We get m plus 9 plus 2m plus 15 plus 3m plus 18. Simplifying that, we get 6m plus 24 plus 18 is 42, divided by 6. And so if we just factor out a 6 from the top, we know that this is equivalent to m plus 7, which if we go back to the top is choice B. So for these examples, what you really want to know is just know all your formulas for the SAT math section and then break down the question. Essentially just look at what it's asking for, break down its parts, and just go about the question that way. On the SAT math section, a lot of it is simply just knowing the formulas, knowing the concepts, and then simplifying these questions down as much as possible until you get exactly what they're asking for. So thank you for watching. Hope you learned something in this video, and we'll see you in the next one.